Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. We're very excited you're here. We're going to take a few minutes to let everybody join this panel. As everybody's coming into the chat, please feel free to put where you're from in the chat box. We'd love to see where from all over the world people are coming. Let's see, we have Texas, Florida, Canada, Oregon, Ohio, Chicago, Quebec, Texas, Boston. Oh my goodness, so many coming in. This is great. Well, we're so happy you're all here, and we can't wait to share this panel with you on using Boom cards for differentiation. So thank you so much for joining us on this panel today. My name is Kari Lisa Johnson, and I'm the marketing director for Boom Learning. We're sharing in the chat some of our links, like for YouTube, Facebook, the other events in the symposium, so our full symposium schedule, as well as the link for the next event.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Claros. I'm a project manager at Boom Learning.
So we're very excited today to be partnering with some wonderful teachers for today's panel. So thank you all for being here with us today. And I'm just going to do quick introductions of everybody. Let's see, we'll start with, before I get into that, we're also offering certificates of attendance. So if you want a certificate of attendance for attending any of the symposium events, you can fill out the form that's provided in the follow-up email. You'll need to answer a few questions to confirm that you attended the entire webinar, and you need to provide some information about yourself as well. So throughout the event, you'll be able to ask questions live, and some of the questions will be answered in writing and others will be answered by the panelists. So we have a Q&A box for your questions. Please post your questions there so that everyone can see the question and the answer. And at the end of the event, we'll be reposting those links. And we hope you join us for the next event on the schedule, which is a Creating Boom Cards Masterclass. So the link will allow you to move into the next room at the hour so that we could get started. And also, if you want to keep anything that's going on in the chat or any of the answers in the Q&A box, make sure to copy and paste it because you will lose access to that after this meeting concludes. So I'd like to introduce the speakers today on our panel. So first we have Tara Boykin, a pianist, composer, piano teacher, music school owner, and all-around piano lover who has been teaching for 20 years. She has developed her own piano method called the Cascade Method. Next, we have Meredith Morgan. She's the educator and creator behind Miss M's Reading Resources. She's been teaching since 2008, with the majority of her teaching experience in kindergarten. Also joining us is Amanda Bowen, a curriculum developer, blogger, professional development speaker, passionate educator, and the creator behind the SciEd Teacher. Amanda has had the pleasure of teaching multiple grade levels and subjects over the course of 11 years in the classroom. And last but definitely not least, we have Trisha Hyde. Trisha taught first grade for 14 years and was a reading intervention coach for 4 years. She also served as an adjunct at her local community college for 5 years, teaching English as a second language to a diverse group of students who are adults. So welcome, everybody. Can you start off by introducing yourselves and explaining a little bit about how you became interested in education?
I'll go first. My name is Meredith Morgan, and I'm a kindergarten teacher. I've taught kindergarten for 10 years now. I first became interested in education and teaching because I have such a strong passion for early literacy and teaching the littles to read.
Hi, I'm Amanda, and I am very passionate about education. I knew that when I was in third grade that I wanted to be a teacher, and it has been such a pleasure to be working with students in the classroom and also creating curriculum that can serve teachers as well.
My name is Trisha Hyde, and I can't tell you when I became interested in education because I've been playing teacher since I was a little girl, probably 6 years old. But I'm passionate about reading and making education fun for kids.
I'll go next. My name is Tara Boykin, and I'm a piano teacher. And my mom's a teacher, so I was kind of born into it. So I knew I wanted to teach something, and I always loved piano and children. So I'm literally living the dream, teaching.
That's wonderful. Well, to have you here. Okay, we're getting a little bit of feedback. So when you're not talking, be sure to mute yourself so that we can all hear. Now, I wanted to start with Trisha and ask, why do you see a need for differentiation in education?
Our students come to us at all different levels. They always have, as long as I've been an educator, especially in the primary grades, they come with different background knowledge, different abilities. And so differentiation just is so important to get kids to where they need to be. And I think now after the pandemic, or at the end of the pandemic, just trying to get all those kids caught up that have like learning gaps, because we know that the gaps are even bigger than they were before.
So does anybody want to kind of define differentiation for us? Maybe that's something Stephanie, a member of the Boom team, can do.
Sure. Hi there. I'm so happy to have all of you here. Welcome to all of our attendees. I'm a former middle school teacher. I'm a certified teacher at 4th through 9th grade, so I have some of that history, and I still tutor my kids. So differentiation for me might look a little different than in kindergarten or at lower levels, but we're just taking basic curriculum each day for our classes and our students, our learners, and we're bringing that curriculum down to meet students where they're at. If some of them are struggling, we use scaffolding also to support those ideas. And these are just techniques for teaching. And then for our GT students, or pre-AP, which is again secondary, really in high school, we're giving these extension pieces and activities to those students who need higher rigor. So I hope that was a very basic understanding of differentiation.
So Amanda, do you think you could give us an example of a time when either you or another teacher you know has used differentiation well?
Differentiation is so important in the classroom to make sure that every student succeeds, because students they learn differently. And so one of the things that I have really enjoyed doing over the past year, and I've been doing this for a handful of years, is with Boon cards, they give you the opportunity to be able to print the cards. And you can print them like they're task cards. And what I've done is I've created Scoot task card games that I will place around the room, and we'll place them on different students' desks, and we'll use those desks as different stations, kind of like centers, like you would do with younger kids, although with me, it's going to be focused on middle school students. And you can pair students that need a little bit of support up with other students, and we set a timer. We put a Boom card on these, one Boom card per station at all these different desks, and the kids will move through the stations and they'll answer the Boom cards. And when they have that support of working together with each other, and they're able to collaborate and talk to each other as they're going through these stations, it helps them build that confidence to be able to know that they can do this on their own, so that when they go to practice the Boom cards independently, they have that confidence built up in their mind and that positive mindset, and it helps them be more successful. So that's one of the things I really enjoy doing with Boom cards.
Meredith, I'd love to know about how you use differentiation with younger students. Trisha as well.
So in my kindergarten classroom, we have choice time every day, and we switch off on using computers and iPads. Boom is so perfect for differentiating during that time because my students think that they are playing when they get to choose the computer or iPad, but really, in fact, they are practicing essential skills that I have signed them from my Boom card library. And every kid has a different set of Boom cards, although some of them I notice are a little more fan favorites than others. So I like to assign those cards to all of my kids so they sort of do see some overlap there, but really their specific set of Boom cards are tailored directly to them, which is so easy. I can do my entire class differentiate their Boom card decks in 10 minutes. I love it.
So you're saying that each of the students are getting customized content, but they don't know that.
They are, with all of my Boom card decks, they are getting their specific set. And I don't like to give them too many options, but between 4 to 10, maybe sometimes even 12 Boom card decks at a time that they can choose from and still feel like they have ownership in their learning. I just love it.
Okay. Does anybody have a counter example or a time when you've seen differentiation used without success, or has it always been successful to differentiate?
It's almost always successful.
It's always a success. No. And are you all required to differentiate? Is that like a state standard, or are some of you doing it by choice and some of you are doing it because it's mandatory?
I feel like in my district, at least, it's sort of an unspoken rule, especially for our primary grades, that we all just know that we every day are differentiating our instruction.
So Tara, I wanted to ask, what are some of the best practices when it comes to personalizing instruction for your students? So this is a different setting. It's not in the classroom.
Yeah, so I teach piano privately, so I'm constantly, I have from 4 or 5-year-olds all the way to 18. So I have to make decks and everything according to levels all the time. And can you repeat the question again?
Oh, I was just wondering, what are some of the best practices that you've found for differentiating the materials between different levels?
Well, so I focus a lot on the younger side until I get, because I've been creating decks for a year and there's so many I need to create and want to create. So I'm starting from the bottom up. And I also have a degree in music therapy. So there's a lot of psychology involved in the way I create decks. And so it's all about making kids feel confident right away. That's why I break them down into really simple tasks. And so reading is really important, but in order to read, there's so many steps to get there before. And so I'll break it down into like notes on my cat.
Yeah, we can see him or her making an appearance.
So yeah, I'll break it down into different decks. That way they feel confident right away. And then when it comes time to read, they're like, oh my God, this is so easy.
That's awesome. And we have heard a lot of educators say that some of the students, they start them off with errorless cards. That way they can't make a mistake and they feel comfortable getting started. And that's an example of differentiation that maybe doesn't have to do with the student's ability level, but more with their personality. So it's knowing who can handle, getting the answers wrong and right, or if they just need a little bit of encouragement to get excited about the subject. So Trisha, I'm curious, as a teacher, how can you use Boom cards to facilitate differentiation and scaffolding?
A couple things that I have done in the past is when I moved to Florida, I taught 3rd grade for a year, and I had some students with significant gaps, kindergarten level. But because I had a big Boom library already created, I was able to put those students at their level with Boom So when I pull them to small group, I would work on a skill and then they would go back to their seat and work on their computer and do a boom deck right at their level. And I'm going to tell you, the other third graders, the above level, the on level, none of them ever really knew what each other was working on. So that helped with those kids' privacy, because even though they could see each other's laptops, they really didn't pay attention. The other thing I like to do is, like, when I'm teaching a skill, is I can narrow down what skill they needed, like the grade before that. So if they're missing that skill before I teach multiplication, maybe they didn't know how to add, 3 numbers together or whatever. I created decks that would help build up to the skill that they needed to be on grade level. And that's what I like about boom cards, but that's what I like about differentiation in small groups, is that you can get to where their gaps are and help build them up to close those gaps.
And do you find that you're able to be in more places at once when you have those small groups going? Can you explain kind of how you manage differentiation in the classroom?
Well, it's a miracle. So there's that.
Yes, that's true. With that many young students running around like crazy.
You have to know your students to be able to differentiate well. And so you have to know where their gaps are, and whether it's you're using a paper screener or a digital screener, to know where their gaps are so that you can fill them. And then just being able to juggle your time, per key pace, and classroom management. All of those things are key. Even if they're all at computers, you still have classroom management that you have to manage, because you have to keep them accountable too. So this may go against like what some people believe, but every day I would check, and if they did, I would give them an assignment, a have to and a want to. If they got their have to done, they got a Skittle, because I could check that so quickly at the end of small group time. And I would be like, okay, these people stand up, and I'd go and hand them all one Skittle. I could move the world with one Skittle a day. But they would get it done for that one little Skittle. So there's just a lot of things you have to do to make differentiation and small groups happen.
Point that the boom cards do have built-in reward system with coins and lightning bolts, so you can make that translate into rewards in the real world, whatever your reward system is for your classroom, whether it's a gold star or extra recess time or whatever it is. You can use those flexible rewards inside the platform to give rewards to students. So Meredith, I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more about how you manage boom cards in the classroom, just the tactics behind it. Like, are you doing it on a smartboard? Are you doing it in centers?
So I do it a few different ways. I have individual students with their, Chrome bases that we have in the classroom and iPads. Small group that way as well. But one of my favorite ways to use boom cards is actually on my whole group view board. It's just like a smart board, but it's sort of newer technology, and the students can actually get up and interact with the boom cards. They absolutely love it. It instantly changes the classroom atmosphere, because students are going to quickly get organized and meet me back on the rug, even just for 2 to 3 minutes as a transition when we're moving to another activity. Boom cards are amazing. I love it. And I have them right up on my view board, super easy, in just a couple clicks. And sometimes I even let my students choose which ones we get to do. And then I randomly choose a few students to come up whole group and do the boom card. They love it. They love it.
Which ones do they normally choose? Do you notice anything in common that they love?
It's funny because every year is different. Last year, I really noticed they loved all of the handwriting boom card decks that I have. And I think that's because they get to be up there longer, especially for my sight word handwriting. And some of them take their time to really make sure that they're doing it correctly. They just love it. And I love how it just instantly changes the classroom and sort of regroups everybody. It's great. Great transition tool, which they weren't meant to be, but I use them that way and I love it.
I'd love to jump in and Okay, because I've always taught one-on-one for the past 20 years, and only recently have I been doing groups. And so not only do I use like boom cards as like the reward at the end of the lesson, you guys were going to do boom cards, so they are so excited for that. But I also use it to reinforce what we've learned in the lesson, and I'll create decks for them specifically that week leading up to it. But also it allows me to do that one-on-one time with the kids that I love and think is really important, and that I'm able to do just because they're small groups. I'm not like, I don't have 20 students like you guys probably. But it allows me to do one-on-one while they work on the concepts that we covered that day.
I wanted to ask Amanda, what do you do to make sure that the differentiation is fun for students?
So one of the things that we do is we really work on at the beginning of the year, building those relationships. And so we enjoy celebrating things together. And with the boom cards, when the students are able to succeed, you hear the little ding, which means that they got it correct. And a lot of students like to keep that on. There's some students that when they've got their Chromebooks out and they're doing the independent boom decks, that they like to keep that off just in case they make a mistake. They feel, you know, safer for nobody else to hear if they got it correct or not. They just want to see the visuals. And for the kids that like to have the noise on, you'll hear other kids in the class cheering each other on and, yeah, you got it correct, and oh, good job. And so I really encourage that for them to encourage each other. And it's just that we all get to celebrate with each other. And so that it's just as simple as that.
So does getting to know the students at the beginning of the year help you pick the themes and the types of activities that they'll do? Can you give an example of a good match between a student and an activity?
Yes, absolutely. So at the beginning of the year, we a lot of times are just given all this paperwork on our students, and it's, you know, paperwork, but then there's so much that you have to read into it between the lines. Who is the student as a whole? And so spending that time in the beginning to get to know them. And I always enjoy, you know, being in middle school, greeting the students as they're coming into the classroom for each period. And then also when we're doing activities is students that are English language learners. Those students I like to pair up with extra supports, like, for example, a picture vocabulary chart that goes along with the boom deck. So when they're doing these, for me, it's teaching science. And so when they're going through these science boom card decks, is they're able to refer to these terms that sometimes can be a little bit difficult, and sometimes some words that we don't use in everyday language. And they're able to see a picture. They're able to see a definition, and they're also able to put everything together and be more successful with it. So that would be something that I like to pair with it. And then also I have some other students that need some support in other ways. And so things that I'll pair with those students will be things such as diagrams. Those can be very, very helpful to put with students, just that extra support that I can just lay a different reference down beside that student. So when they're doing those boom decks, that they can all share together in being successful.
And do you share those types of extra supports when the students are doing assessments as well?
It depends on the student. And there are some instances when I will, and there are some instances when I won't. And it's all about making an equitable environment. So I want, since every student does learn differently, I want to create an equal learning experience where students that need the extra supports get those supports that they need. And then students that need to be challenged a little bit in a different way are also challenged.
And privately. The great thing with boom cards is they can get supports and no one has to know that they had those supports.
Exactly. I love that about it.
Yeah. So I had another question for Meredith, and that's, I wanted to know if you had any good learnings that came out of the pandemic. So did you gain more insight about what works or even what doesn't work for students?
So I was absolutely shocked that my kindergarten students who had never been in school before were able to learn. And I credit a lot of their independent learning, meaning time that they weren't on Zoom with me, to Boom Cards because they loved it. It was engaging. I was able to direct their and differentiate their Boom Card decks right to them, and they loved it. So they were getting the specific practice that they needed. And I really was surprised every time I sat down to do an assessment. I sort of braced myself, and every time was so pleasantly surprised that they were learning to read through a computer. It was amazing.
So you mentioned before when we spoke that the students were really more technically savvy than your students in the past, but they had trouble with some of the fine motor skills like cutting
When
and
we
handwriting.
to the classroom in March of last year, or March of 2021, I was so shocked that they could instantly pick up a computer. They had no problems using a mouse or a keyboard, which, if anyone teaches kindergarten, that's never the case. But what they struggled with were all of the fine motor, scissors, holding a pencil, their pencil grip, handwriting, letter formation, but their computer and technology literacy skills were off the charts.
And so that brings us around to this kind of question of equity, because I know that Trisha, you mentioned having students that didn't have as much access to internet at home and how that can be really a challenge. Do you have anything you could share about that experience?
I don't know what to say other than, every child doesn't have the same environment at home, and depending on where you live and their social economic status, will obviously depend at home what type of support, and if they have adult support to help them learn how to use the technology. I know on my campus that we did check out laptops to kids that didn't have technology at home, but a lot of them also didn't have internet at home, or some of them were hotspotting on their parents' cell phones, which drags it down. But there might be 4 siblings in one house trying to do school at the same time on the internet, trying to do things digitally.
So on that end, you almost have the differentiation in content, but also trying to think about access and what students have access to. And so that's part of the reason why we make Boom Cards available on low bandwidth internet and also on mobile devices. But again, that doesn't solve the problem for all students. There are a huge range of needs out there. But when we think about the importance of differentiation, really understanding that students have different levels of access and support outside of the classroom is important to remember.
Well, and while a lot of us got to stay home and work, some of their mommies and daddies or whoever was caring for them didn't necessarily have the type of job that they got to stay home. They were an essential worker for whatever reason. So we had lots of kids that were home alone trying to do technology, and because their parents had nowhere for them to go when they needed them, when they should have been in school. You know what I'm trying to say, but
I think I do. Yeah, I think I do.
They didn't have a place for them to go, but they still had to go to work to make money because they didn't have the type of job that they had the luxury of being able to stay home and work. So some of our kids were even at home alone with no adults to help support them with the technology.
Which on a certain level makes that relationship with the teacher even more important. Like you can't just assign students something digital and then send it and forget it. Like it's all about that relationship and that personal connection.
And we were able to provide like some supports with, whether it be kids coming up to the school, because I did use Boom Cards. Some of the things I created were created in a panic because when we went to school closures, the school district I was in originally wouldn't even let us teach on like Zoom or anything because everybody was really worried about privacy. There were so many unknowns at that time that it took a good probably 3 to 4 weeks before we were allowed to start doing Zoom meetings with our kids. So the one thing I did is I real quick started making Boom cards, and we were able to help kids just get logged in basically to, keep learning. But I think we learned a lot, and a lot of adults learned a lot with technology through this.
That's definitely the truth. So we have a ton of questions from the audience, so I want to hop into those. Our first one is from Amy, and she asked, Amanda, silly question. The stations are still on the computer, right? They never have printing. Is that correct?
It's not a silly question at all. One of the things I tell my students is the only silly question is to not ask the question. And so there's different things that we can do with distance learning. We can have different Boom lessons, which is another thing that I love that is a great tool for online learning. For this particular thing that I was talking about, I was talking about actually printing the Boom cards themselves, which is an option. You can go in there and print the cards off, cut them out, laminate them, or print them onto cardstock, and then put them onto kids' actual desks. So that would be an activity for in the classroom. And that was something that we did a little bit more collaboratively, so that when we did the Boom cards independently, they were more comfortable with them. So that was just a good thing to do, I thought, at the beginning of the year, just to get students used to the Boom cards and how they work very closely to task cards. Although quite a few of the decks have features that you can't always print them and do them. For example, I've got
like audio.
Right. The audio you can't do. And then also for drag and drop. So if you're doing things like you're labeling a different diagram for, let's say you're labeling the organs in the body, and, that's something that you're typing on the screen, or you're dragging and dropping different words into certain places to label that diagram. Those are things that need to be done on the Boom cards. However, there's quite a few Boom cards that have multiple choice question and answer formats, and those are really great for printing for the beginning of the year, just to get kids used to Boom cards and how they work.
Great. So we had another question from Ellie, who asked, I'm wondering which Boom features are the most helpful to students. I add audio, which can be turned off, but I don't know if that's helpful. I'm wondering about other things such as color coding or leveling. And she wants to know what type of leveling by grade level, etc. So that's kind of a question for everyone. I assume that Tara, you probably use a lot of audio in your Boom cards, but are there any other tips and tricks that you guys have for leveling using some of the features?
One thing that I do is that I don't make the audio autoplay on all of my decks, because some teachers use these in special education rooms, and they may not want the audio to autoplay, or for those higher kids so that they have to read. But the other thing that I've started doing is I used to title it with like a grade level, but because I had so many SPED teachers contact me and say, you know what, I'm using this with a 5th grader, could you take the word first grade out of it? Because I would say, adding to 10 for first grade, or however I would title it. And so I started removing the grade level, because if you have to assign the deck to an older child, but they're at a lower level, it kind of hinders them, because they get fixated on, oh, this is for a first grader. I'm in 5th grade. Why am I doing a first grade deck? So I try to keep the grade level out, and I try to keep the audio so that the kid has the option to listen to it. And what I love about Boom is they can re-listen to it if they don't hear it the first time.
And I think that's another tip that we say you could use with ESL, ELL, ENL, is having the instructions or the questions read. So for instance, you don't want somebody to be hindered in learning math because they're having trouble reading a word problem. So maybe if you have an audio version of the word problem, they might be able to understand better, or even in translation, something like that can really be helpful.
That's super important also. So I have audio for all of my instructions as well.
And I don't know about color coding. I haven't heard a lot about color coding, but that might be a great solution to solve the problem that Trisha mentioned about grade level, and that being an indicator to student, especially as you get up into the older grades and the students are getting differentiation and assessment. You might use things like color codes or things like that to keep them from being self-conscious about any differentiation that is going on. So Michelle asked, can you talk about how you organize your Boom library to facilitate differentiation? So do you have any tips with organizing your library?
I can go on that. So tips for organizing your library, and I love organization. I think if you're a teacher, you have to love organization. So one of the things that we can do is we can assign our decks to the entire class, or we can go in individually and assign decks to those students. And so if there's some students that I want to have certain decks, I won't assign it to the entire class. I'll just assign it to those individuals that need to work on that deck, whether it's a more challenging deck for enrichment, or whether it's a deck that will help them be able to build a stronger foundation.
So we have another question from Michelle, and that was that she's not familiar with D-board. And I think if somebody mentioned D-board, I think that's decision boards, right? So does anybody want to talk about what a decision board is?
Okay, so I can go on that one too. So basically, one of the things that we do is just being able to allow students to have a choice in their learning. Just like when you're teaching a lesson, we want to take those lessons and we want to personalize them. We want to stop and have those moments and ask students, for example, if I'm talking about some kind of science phenomenon, I want to ask students, have they ever seen an example of that in their own lives? And, you know, talking about a very simplistic example, we could talk about something like rainbows, right? And, you know, students can all raise their hand because they've all seen rainbows, and it helps the students be able to be a part of. And so when we give students the choice and we let them be a part of, they're going to be more likely to take ownership. And when they take ownership, they're going to have more confidence in what they're doing. And that confidence really helps create that competence, because it's all about the mindset.
So I think I want to call out some specific features that help with differentiation within Boom cards. One is the ability to hide cards. Then we also have, so one student might get more cards than another student. You can shuffle them in different ways. So for some students, they can be presented in order, and you can only show the easier cards at the beginning. And then for another student, they could be randomized. And then we also have a nice notebook feature, which allows the student to, again, take ownership over their learning by flagging something as either, I really like this, I want to learn more about it, or this was challenging for me. I should probably practice this again in the future if I want to get good at it. So we have a lot of features like that, custom play settings that enable students to really have a different learning experience, even when they're working on the exact same set of Boom cards. So my last question for all you guys before we break, because we have a lot of other sessions going on today, is what do you wish more people knew about Boom cards or about differentiation?
I just in general wish that teachers knew how easy Boom cards were. I think that especially during the beginning phases of the pandemic, there were so many new pieces of technology that teachers had never heard of, and it was so overwhelming that I just would love for everyone to know how easy they are for not just teachers to assign and find what we're looking for, but for students to use effectively. They're just so easy to use.
I'd like to say too, like as a music teacher, we all have our style, and I've been able to adapt it and make it exactly the way my method is. And I've shown other teachers on Instagram, and so many are starting to make boom cards too that are the way they teach. And so I just think that's a huge plus.
That's one of my favorite things as well, that a teacher, let's say a veteran teacher who's been teaching for 40 years, has their favorite sequence that they teach. It's this worksheet, and then it's this assessment, and then it's this interactive activity. You can continue with what's tried and true for you, but just make it more accessible. So at the beginning of apps, Eric, our CTO, always jokes that he kept hearing about teachers who were paying to have someone develop a whole app for them. And this enables you to take what you're already doing, take your favorite worksheet, and turn it into something that a student can do on a mobile phone. And that's really, I think, different than what a lot of other companies are offering, where it's pre-made. Here you can buy the pre-made boom cards, or you can make your own favorite activity into an app or into the game. So how about you, Trisha? Is there anything that you wish more people knew about differentiation or about boom cards?
I just wish that they would know that boom cards are they're so easy to use. There's a teeny learning curve as a teacher to learn how to assign them, because I'm just going to be honest, sometimes when I first started assigning them, I knew how to make them, I knew how to publish them. Assigning them was a little bit tricky, but it's gotten easier. And once you do it a couple times, you get the hang of it. But after that, it's so quick to change out your centers, like a minute to change out what everybody's going to do for the day or for the week. And you can't beat that over. I still provide activities that the kids are cutting and moving manipulatives and stuff, but that is one thing that I don't have to worry about. I don't have to laminate it. I don't have to cut it. It's right there. It's ready in 1 minute, and they can't lose the pieces to it. The other thing is just that, sorry, now I'm going to go on a tangent. I love boom cards for like test prep review. And so I would put them on the screen too, and have the kids answer on their whiteboard, hold up their whiteboards. And I would know when I would pick an equity stick, I would pull that little name out and know, oh, they got it right. What was your answer? So-and-so. And I knew they got it right because I saw their whiteboard. They could click it and instantly feel successful that, oh, we got it right. But I just love boom cards, and they're easy to use once you get to know them.
So we did have a question from somebody, and this is, I promise, the last one. They said, how do you keep track of all the students? How are all the students are doing, assigning things and then their scores? And that's really a part of the Boom Learning platform, that it does it automatically for you. Once you upload your list of students, you can do that through a single sign-on with another service like Google Classroom or Clever or something like that. Then once your students are in there, you can assign something to everyone. You can do custom play settings so that it's a slightly different assignment for different students. And then those reports come to you automatically. They're automatically graded, and you can look in as a whole class or also by individual student. And you can even drill down to the level of question by question, like how long did this person take to answer? And that lets you know the length of time they took, whether they're guessing or whether they're really struggling over something and then getting it wrong, or whether they're answering it after thinking about it, or they're answering it super quickly and they need to move on to something more advanced. So unfortunately, that's all the time we're going to have for today. So I just cannot thank all our panelists enough. You guys have been awesome and given us so much food for thought. I do want to thank everyone who came and who enjoyed the event. And just a friendly reminder, you can join us for our next symposium event, which is the Creating Boom Cards Masterclass. This is going to be all about how to create your own boom cards, which is starting next. That's starting right at the hour. So we're giving you about 15 minutes to do what you need to do, get yourself a cup of coffee, and then join us back at the next event the Creating Boom Cards Masterclass. And we're having a number of other events as part of the Boom Back to School Symposium. And I hope that Stephanie is posting in the chat the links so that you guys all know where to turn for the schedule and what to click on for the next event. By registering, you're also signing up to receive a video recording. So that means that you'll be able to watch it now or later. And we do have that personal development certification that we can give, and that will be in the follow-up email for this session as well. And we're having a social hour at 3:30 that requires no registration. So feel free to pop in and say hi. Let us know what you thought of the panel, and if you learned anything today so far that's been valuable to you. And we look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. And thanks again to our wonderful panelists for sharing all of their knowledge.